The following program has been rated GE by the Kenya Film Classification Board. It is therefore suitable for general family viewing.
Hello viewer, welcome to Chungu cha Jamii. I'm your host Eunice Mugo. Today on the show we are talking about the critical education in SRHR. Do you know what is SRHR? Have you ever heard of it? Do you involve yourself around it? Send in your question, your comments across all our social media networks. That's GBS TV Africa. Our SMS line is 21144. I'm not alone. I have a guest with me who is going to help us to understand better what is SRHR and how impactful it is in our society today. I will allow her to introduce herself. Welcome, guest.
Thank you so much, Eunice. So my name is Allen Gaki. I am a pharmacy student at KU, currently in level 3. Besides that, I am a volunteer at Respect, that is reproductive and sexual health program for Kenyan teens. It's Respect with a K, K standing for Kenyan. And yeah, we are here to talk about SRHR. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaki, for honoring our invite. To start with, we are talking about SRHR.
Yeah.
What is SRHR?
SRHR is sexual and reproductive health rights. So SRHR, sexual and reproductive health, is not abbreviated, rights. Yeah.
So what do we need to understand today when you're talking about SRHR?
So today, when we are talking about SRHR, maybe some our viewers, maybe you can take a pen, or maybe you have a to-do list somewhere you can list down and just grab a content or two about SRHR, where we shall be talking about what SRHR entails, how we advocate for it at Respect, and how we intend to ensure that we continue the SRHR that has already happened in Kenya. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. You've just mentioned it that is in Kenya, and you also have a volunteer and you're advocating for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Maybe to mention just a few. What is Respect advocating for in regards to SRHR?
So SRHR in itself is very wide, it's very broad. So we talk about several things. We talk about, when you hear about sexual, obviously you relate it to sexually transmitted infections, that is the STIs, including the HIV, gonorrhea, syphilis, and all that. We also talk about mental health, because there's a lot of psychological activities that happen to those who are affected by either those that are affected by SRHR violation, that is the violation of their rights. We shall also talk about some things like educating the youths, and at what age should you introduce what, because SRHR in itself is very wide. We will talk about the body changes, what shall happen at what time, what you're supposed to yourself to advocate for, what you're supposed to yourself choose. So those are other things that you can talk about. Another thing is about advocacy for it and the research that has happened on that side, the rights that you yourself have. We also talk about leadership as well. So a lot of things encompass SRHR in Respect. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. As you've mentioned, that you have different stages that we also need to understand how SRHR come. Maybe you can just mention the stages of which you're talking about.
Okay, so SRHR, it starts from a very young age. Of around 10, you can start talking to your kid about it. That's like a middle ground, because from 10 years you expect the child will start experiencing puberty, their body changes that encompass the whole SRHR, like for example boobs, the boobs growing up, the enlargement of the boobs. We also have enlargement of the chest. We also have voice deepening. We also have menstrual health that takes place at that time when you're into puberty and adolescent age. So there are a lot of stages of it, and from adolescent we may also expect, after you've grown, we may also expect pregnancy to occur. After pregnancy, we may also expect abortion. And if you don't go through all that, you may get married, and even before marriage, you may experience gender-based violence. Another thing that we saw at the beginning of the year, the femicide as well, that's also part of SRHR. Yeah, so all those stages take place during SRHR.
Mm-hmm. With these different stages that you have been able to cap and also mention right now, I'm looking at it and I'm wondering, at the age of 10, in as much as it's good to educate our children today, and more so the girl child and also the boy child, for them to be at par in terms of knowledge, what is it that you talk in these different stages? If today you're talking to a 10-year-old, what is the bracket that you're talking to? Is it 10 to 18 that you're talking about the same thing? Or are you talking in different angles? Because also their understanding is also different. If you, when you're talking about 10-year-old, I'm saying that is a primary kid. But when you're talking about 14-year-old, more likely is a high school kid. So also their understanding and also their self-desire is different. How do you now differentiate in terms of age and what to talk at this particular time?
Yeah, that's true. In education, they say we should give an age-appropriate content, because there's no way someone will teach you about 1 times 10 before they teach you about 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. So something needs to be gradual during the education of it. So while I talk about 10 years, this may not actually be the case that's happening in our Kenyan education system, but it's something that we advocate for. At that 10 years, you as a parent should be able to talk to your kid about what's happening in their body and what they should expect. Don't let the kid actually come and find out later on their own that they actually are looking more prettier or anything else has happened because of the compliments they're getting. You yourself should be able to compliment the kid. Let the kid understand that indeed whatever is happening is actually supposed to happen. At 10 years, we've had some ladies even getting their menstrual period at 9 years old, a very young age. So as talking about 10 years of age, you starting to talk about the changes that they'll experience in their body is actually very good. But in our Kenyan education system, we're still, the KICD is still crafting the CSE, that is a continuous sexual education for the students as they go on, but you can start, the kid can start interacting with the content at around that time. So you will not talk about pregnancy to a 10-year-old. That is what I talked about, age appropriateness. So you'll talk about pregnancy probably to an older person around 14, 15 years of age. So us as respect, most we do talk to high school students who are at around the age of from 14, 15 to 18 and even more. So the reason we do that is because we, at that age, we can be able to tell this person everything encompassing SRHR, the rights they have, what they go through in their body, how they're supposed to maintain hygiene during the menstrual period time, how they're supposed to either consent or decline an offer when it comes to sexual abuse, and even if they're molested against their will, they're supposed to report, because when they report, actually within the 72 hours, we can be able to cap the STIs associated with the molestation as well. And besides that, they can be able to get justice for that kid who has been molested. Yeah.
Interesting. You've mentioned something more than once in regards to the people that you're talking to, the students, that they should also understand their rights. What are these rights are we talking about? And are they the same when you're talking about boys and girls?
Okay, so the rights that we are talking about, there's so many, but the most important thing that we normally stress on is consent and what follows after what, and what they're supposed to do in the event of something happening, like for example a rape case. So when we talk about rights, first thing, they have a right to consent, whether to actually have the sexual intercourse or not. We try to teach it in a very easy manner. Like for example, I may give an example of how we teach it. We may come to a kid and tell him, today you received a visitor, and this visitor, you ask the visitor, do you want to take black tea? And the visitor declines the offer. So the next time they come, you ask them the same question, do you want black tea? And the same visitor who declined the offer at that time will tend to say, yeah, today can have black tea. So they will take the black tea at that time. So the next time they come, you're not just supposed to assume that because they accepted at that time, you can as well still continue serving them black tea. So you will still continue asking them, do you still want black tea? And they'll say, maybe today I want white tea. So at that particular point, you teach the kid that sometimes you may accept and sometimes you may not accept. And accepting will come with these consequences, and the declining comes with these other consequences. So it's the same case when it comes to SRHR and sexual related matters. So at that time, if a person consents, doesn't mean that the next time they will consent. And if today they decline the offer, doesn't mean that tomorrow they'll accept the offer. So first thing, we teach them about consent.
Let me interrupt you there and ask you this. When you're talking about the consent, right? If you're going to have this conversation with a student from high school between the age of 14 to 18, is it against, is it something that is appreciated? Because as a parent first, I wouldn't appreciate if, I'd appreciate if my child knows about it, but I'll also not appreciate the fact that it's like an open cast. Why am I saying this? It's because, like we mentioned before, in our Kenyan rights, any sexual activity, if she agrees or doesn't agree, as long as the child is under 18 years old, that one is rape case. Actually, it's not even called rape case, it's called defilement. That one goes with no question, as long as the kid is not 18 years and above. So if you guys are talking you're talking to the students between 14 years to 18 years, then that tells me like you're empowering them to be in a know-how of saying at this, it's like saying I can agree to have sex, I can agree not to have sex. Okay. Which in our Kenyan law, it's defilement, whether you agree to it or don't agree to it.
Yeah, I get your sense of view, and we normally get such questions when we are going around with our education. But we always say knowledge is power, and it's very good to make an informed decision. So even if we don't talk about it or we talk about it, we sometimes we're even having teens impregnating other teens, like a 17-year-old impregnating a 16-year-old or even an 18-year-old or a 17 and a half. All those are just teens. Sure. So how do we deal with such a case? It's very good for us to talk to them about what's happening and what can happen. Actually, some of these kids engage in sexual context. We call it the Romeo and Juliet relationship. It may happen even when they're in primary school, and we have such cases. I myself have seen it happen because while I was in class 8, I had a seatmate actually who got pregnant at 14 years old, and the one who was responsible for it was around 16 years old, just a high school student. So they are both teens. So if we don't talk about it, they will end up causing harm to themselves. So what comes after teaching them about consent? The next thing is, so before that we obviously have talked about abstinence. We have also adequately talked about abstinence and its good consequences, such as with abstinence, you don't get exposed to any STI, you don't get exposed to the human papilloma virus that causes cancer, you don't expose yourself to so many other things that tend to harm your body. But if you cannot abstain, now there are other options. You need to be faithful to that one partner, maybe for you not to get interacted with so many partners that can end up giving you HIV and AIDS and other STIs. Another thing is you don't get to spread the disease if you yourself have it already. And then number C is about condomizing. So after consent, you need to condomize, because if you cannot be able to retain your urge, it is very possible for you to prevent yourself from getting all these other consequences like pregnancy and STIs when you condomize. And another thing, we'll also talk about drug abuse. That is because drug abuse will tend to impair your judgment. You may consent while you yourself didn't want to consent. That comes about with drug abuse influence. And all those we will teach during that time. So what we do is, you've talked about parents not being able to talk about all that, and maybe a teacher not being able to talk about it. So what we do, we provide a safe space, a space where someone who can just come and talk to you about a certain thing that is happening in her life, that she cannot talk to you as the mother, that she cannot talk to the guidance and counseling teacher, that she cannot even talk to you any other person, not even the closest friend. But when we provide a safe environment for them, they can talk to us about it, and we can be able to empower their mental wellness, and as well as help them to improve their grades if they're mentally okay. Yeah.
Let me ask to get this one maybe more clearer.
Oh, yeah.
All this that you've mentioned, you're talking it to a high school student?
A teenager. That's a teenager who is almost transitioning to adulthood. Remember, when we joined campus, which I joined around 3 years back, no one gets to talk to you about this. Yes, we're doing it.
If you're talking it to a Form 3, Form 4, makes a lot of sense. But if you're talking it to, when you're talking about teenagers, I'm looking at it from 13 years old.
We don't specialize in the smaller ones, like the junior schools and the primary schools. We are doing it to high school students.
Form 1, Form 2, they're also so naive.
Yeah, I mean, they are also
because
so naive.
What you've mentioned, to me, I'm looking at it as what you're saying, it's very profound. And it, if the same thing you're talking to maybe a Form 3, Form 4, because they're transiting to campus, to colleges, to all that, and that is when they're being exposed to the so-called freedom, and they want to experiment everything. That makes a lot of sense. Because that is where, because personally call me old school, but I believe in abstinence. If you're abstaining from at that age to that, because I can only control as much. Yeah. And I can also oversee things as much as they are around me. But when they come to adulting, I can barely micromanage them or look so, as in, how do I put it? I cannot be following up in everything. I'll give them space to be who they are in growing up, and also having that I've taught them. There is also room for you to understand whatever decision you make, there is consequences for it. But at the same time, what you've just, I was listening to you and I'm like, whoa, this one is of information for anyone who is, I mean, 16, no, even 16 is young, like 17 and below. Because condomizing, one, I feel once we're talking into that direction, we are already like acknowledging and welcoming it. It's part of norm, given that the talk that you have today in the society, actually, with the generation that we are in today, you can barely find a virgin. Why? because the culture that you are brought up in of how to value yourself as a person, a girl or a boy, that is the precious gift that you can give in marriage, you not being active. Right now, if I'm to say today I'm a virgin, everyone will be looking at me with a lot of wow. You still exist in this. It's like I'm someone who is coming from the ancient world, which is also, personally, I feel it's something very good if you also know yourself. But the society that we are in today doesn't appreciate that. So how do you handle, because also if you look at it in the sense of culture, there are those culture that don't appreciate their children being exposed to that. And also, if they are supposed to be exposed to that, then that means these children are going to be married off at an early age, which is also not, which is also against our Kenyan law and also not fair for whoever is being married off. Mostly it's the girl child who gets affected most.
Okay, so to respond to that, there was a study that was done by a certain reporter. I think her name was Evelyn Wanjala. That was back then in 2015, and she reported this study. She called her case study as running blind. So she came up, there was this lady, they called her Mary, if I'm not wrong. That's a pseudonym. So this Mary had gone, the mother, so she was the firstborn in that family, and the mother was very busy with her work. She was never around, and the person who used to closely take care of them was their uncle, who was a bit younger than the mother. So she could wash the children in the morning, prepare them for school, prepare herself for school, come back in the evening, prepare supper, serve everyone in the family, including the uncle who was closely taking care of them. So at around the age of 14, this child actually was molested and by the uncle, and she did not realize that she had gotten pregnant. And immediately after that molestation, the uncle had ran away and to a place that was not known to anyone. And so after she realized that indeed she had gotten pregnant, she went to her best friend, who told her they can go to a certain clinic who actually does abortions, procures abortions. And because it was around, at that time she could not have gotten enough money to do it. It was against the law, but still some clinics do it behind the scenes. So it was very expensive for this lady, and she couldn't afford it. So what she took something that actually did the abortion, but back at home. And whatever she did up to date, she cannot get pregnant because even she ended up corroding the uterus, and she cannot give birth as they were doing that study. So it was something that was very bad, bearing in mind she never knew about all this information from inception. Even at that time, whoever is around them just has myths of this information. So the reason as to why we tend to give the information in full without hiding anything is to ensure we eliminate the myths and the misconceptions around the community, that you can have a certain way that will help you procure an abortion. It is not safe first thing, but there are places where you can get safe and specialized care, and maybe if you get some psychological help, you may not even end up terminating the pregnancy itself. So it's always good to give the information in full and let the person make an informed decision, because she herself was claiming, if at all I knew that if I did procure an abortion the safe way, I could easily get another baby right now. I could not be getting the problems that she said she had, because she said her uterus normally grows to a point where you can even think she's actually pregnant, but it is not even pregnancy at all. She cannot get pregnant. So if we continue concealing the information and saying it's for the older generation that are just going out there and still getting the same myths that have been transmitted from one community to another, treating it as a cultural taboo where you don't get to openly talk about these things. It will be very easy for us to lose the next generation because these people don't understand actually their rights. Another thing we tend to talk about is gender-based violence. It is good to note that the gender-based violence doesn't only affect the ladies. That is why it has the name gender. Otherwise, we would have noted it as female-based violence. So some men actually go through the gender-based violence, but they don't know they have gone through it. So if someone actually does the intercourse with you as a man, and it was against your will, you had not consented to it, like we hear of some Uber drivers reporting it somewhere in some radio stations about it. That's actually gender-based violence, and you are supposed to report about it and get specialized care, that is health care, and not only health care in terms of the physiological one where you go to a hospital and they do checkups. You're also supposed to get the psychological attention from the counseling psychologists who have learned about it. So it's very good to give the full information, and because no one out there is talking about it and distinguishing the facts from the myths and misconceptions, that is why we have embarked on this role to advocate for it efficiently all around. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, because now once you've elaborated it that way, it makes a lot of sense. Viewer, I hope you're learning as much as I am. We want to take a short break. Send in your question, your comments across all our social media networks. That's GBS TV Africa. Our SMS line is 21144. We'll be back shortly.